Hello guys and welcome to the second video of this week number 5. So in the previous lesson we were talking about forgetting in the two acceptions that Oswald proposes, forgetting for rote and forgetting for meaningful learning that is a little bit more systematic. In this short lesson, we're going to analyze some specific aspects of forgetting and second language. That is something that really concerns us as English teachers. And I'm going to be explaining the assignments for this week. Okay. So if you can be so kind and go to the slide number 25, we will see forgetting and second language, and we will see this phenomenon of language attrition. That is just a fancy way to say that loss of second language skills. So this loss of second language skills may translate into forgetting vocabulary, forgetting let's say certain pronunciations, forgetting some particular rules of modification of verbs, of nouns, rules related to adjectives, well, you name it. Let's say learning a language and then realizing that you are able to manage it or to have command of the language less and less, right? This happens pretty often, pretty often. Of course, let's say that the most common reason that we attribute to this loss is lack of practice. You say, oh, if you don't use a language, you are going to forget it. If you don't practice a language, you will forget it very easily. Well, sure, that is a way of putting it, but then we have other variables. No, think about, for example, how most of the students in Colombia spend 11 years studying English in school and spend another 5 years studying English in the university. Let's talk about careers that are not English related, and then in the end they are not able to get even an A2 in or even sometimes not even A1 into a standardized exam, right? So well, there are some different reasons for it. Remember that, let's say that the most generic ones we already explained them in terms of forgetting in rote learning. But here we have like some other variables that might be interesting to discuss or to approach, right? So the first one is the conditions of initial learning. This has to do with methodological reasons and also with psychological reasons, right? So in terms of methodology, if you forget a language, it is very likely that your initial approach with the language was not the best. Probably the activities that you were provided were not correct, were not the most adequate. Probably the command of the language of your teacher was not necessarily the best. That happens a lot here in Colombia, let's say especially in elementary education in some places, where they simply assign the task of teaching English to a teacher that doesn't even speak English himself or herself, just because he needs to complete his schedule, right? And maybe the teacher will do his best to teach the best way he can, but well, he was probably not trained for doing this, and sometimes this position is not the only thing that's necessary. It requires some knowledge, experience, methodological approaches, and etc., right? Yeah, that's one thing. Then the other thing may be the psychological reasons, and this may have to do with a teacher that you normally remember for being very strict, yes, being really scary. So somehow it was difficult for the person to feel comfortable with the language. He or she was always scared about participating or something like that, and that's a possibility, no? So he or she will always remember English like this terrible thing that was just not desirable, that was scary, that was confusing, and that he or she wouldn't like to learn, right? This may happen with any subject, right? Math, and many people have problems with math because of their teachers, right? Or we can have the complete opposite, and this happens a lot with English. Man, it was a subject that was not really exigent, that it was really easy, that whatever you did, well, you passed. And this extreme is also vicious, right? So you were never really very concerned about that because you never saw the importance of it, and that's why you didn't pay attention to it. Yes, and this may happen with any language, right? I know for a fact that for some of you guys, well, not exactly you, because I think that you're just taking French this semester, but some of the students that I have known from 9 or 10 semester, or even people who graduated, well, some of them have that problem with French. Like they do not really take it seriously, and they don't think that it's important, and well, that's why they sort of miss these 3 semesters that you are offered, and that should be taken advantage of because you have really good teachers. One of them was the one who taught me French, and I know for a fact that it's a great teacher. Well, the thing is that these extremes may create initial conditions that you're going to remember, or create some sort of conditioning in either Pavlov's or Skinner's terms, and it's not going to be beneficial for learning. Okay. Then we have the second aspect, that is kind of use of the second language. Okay, you learn the language, good, bad, regular. How do you use it? Yes. So it's very likely that if your professional development doesn't require it, you're going to forget it. Yes, you're going to forget it at some point because you don't use it, because it's not relevant for your day-to-day activities, and well, that's something that may happen. Maybe let's say that in your profession you use it now and then, but you have contact only with non-native speakers, so that is going to create certain somehow conditions in which you are going to forget to use some of the more native representation of language or slang, or certain parts of the whole thing that you learned is going to be that way. Let's imagine that you use it in your day-to-day activities, but you only write, that you sort of reply to emails, so you just do that, read and write. So your oral skills are most likely going to be affected somehow. Yes. Well, let's imagine that you work in a call center. Well, you're speaking all the time, but the registration in English, I mean, the part that you write is not so common. So, well, very, very likely you're going to forget certain things, or you're going to be less proficient about writing skills. You will be constantly making spelling mistakes, double T's, double S's, initial S's, Z's, well, whatever, right? So this use that you give to the second language may be a determinant factor for it. Motivational or demotivational factors, definitely that affects a lot. Yeah, so if you are studying English because I don't know, your parents paid a vacation for you, and you want to have some possibility of communicating abroad, well, for sure it's going to be, thank you, for sure it's going to be a factor that is going to help you to go faster, to be interested, to study on your own, etc. What about if it's the opposite? Like if you sort of have to learn the language because you have to apply for a job you don't want, because that's the only thing that you were able to find a job in, because I don't know, you have to do it for an activity that you don't particularly like, or that pays you a low salary. Well, there are different aspects in here, right? The point is, If you're not very motivated, it's very likely again that you're going to either forget or lose skills in these different things. Now this one is really important, the next one. Too much rote activity at the expense of meaningful communication in the classroom. Okay? And I think that this might be the case of many students of English or any other second language in Colombia, um, throughout many different generations. Hopefully you're going to change that, right? And hopefully some of your partners in the past, the ones who have already graduated in the last 5 years, 10 years, well, they are changing that. But most likely in the past, there were a lot of rote activities, memorizing, learning isolated words, isolated formulas, grammar structures that were not connected at all ones with the other, that were artificial, that were not really, I mean, didn't have a place in the usual day-to-day communication, and the communicative activities were very limited, right? So it happens a lot, for example, with a certain kind of courses in which you just input memory stick information and that's it, right? So remember that we were doing an activity in the last week in which we tried to identify some things that didn't actually need to have any association, in which rote learning was completely fine. Um, but then, when there is an excess of that, it's very likely that you are going to be unable to connect things, and that's why, according to Oswald's theory, knowledge will be either never achieved or easily forgotten. Now, it is important to know that even though we tend to forget things with time in terms of language, well, according to Oswald's theory, the long-term forgetting can apply only to a certain linguistic features, right? So there is in the parentheses over there in the slide 25, you will see some of them. Lexical, probably you can forget about certain words, about certain specific type of vocabulary. Yes, you may forget certain things related to phonology or phonetics. Yes, so you may forget somehow how to exactly pronounce certain things or to have intonations, etc. Maybe syntactic. Yes, probably you forget what is the order of certain things. But once you learned the language, well, Oswald proposes that there are some practical things that you never forget. Yes? So how to answer a particular questions, the greetings such as good morning, good evening, let's say certain intonations, certain, let's say, formulas of answering or asking questions or making suggestions or let's say preconceived expressions that we normally normally learn, such as I don't know, or things like that. So Oswald proposes that those are, let's say, never forgotten under normal conditions. Okay, so that's a little bit of what I had to share with you in terms of forgetting and specifically second language, and always take that into account, guys, because hopefully as teachers we're trying to make or to create the conditions so students can remember at least the most basic things, and we don't have to repeat the whole thing again for next course, especially on language courses, right? So take all this into account for the exercise of your profession. Well, guys, we have then 2 assignments for this week. I am going to explain both of them. Let's go with the assignment number 1, and you will find it on the slide number 26. Okay, so please, there are 2 questions in there. I want you to read them and to immediately, like after you read them, immediately answer them. Okay, I am counting on your honesty. This is not about how much do you know. It's just what is going to be practical for the exercise. Okay, so the first one: what is the adjective order in English? Remember that when we're using multiple adjectivation, you are supposed to put all these adjectives, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many, in a very particular order, right? It is supposed to be first one thing, then the other, then the other, then the other, right? So if we're talking about materials and colors and let's say personal things or physical things, or if we're talking about immaterial or opinions, yes, so there must be a specific order that by the level that you are in the semester that you are supposed to know. Okay, so first of all, answer while you're listening to this video, do you remember that? Yes or no? Okay, it is okay to say no, so just answer yes or no. In the second one, list some nouns with no plural in English. Okay, so you're going to write a list of some words that have no plural. Yes, again, list them like right now, write 2 or 3, or if definitely you don't remember anything, well, just say to yourself, no, sorry, I cannot remember that. Okay, so that is the first thing that I need you to do. Reply immediately mentally if you remember or not. Okay, so first case, let's imagine that you remember, yes, that you are able to correctly mention the order of the adjectives in English, and after that you say to yourself yes, you go to your notebook or to the internet and you take a look at the answer to that question and you say, oh yes, I knew. Yes, so that is the first thing, that you are able to answer both questions correctly. So if that is the case, you are going to classify that learning, because it meant that you learn about adjectives and that you meant about nouns without plural. Okay, so you classify it, think about it, and think, why do you remember that? Okay, and try to classify that learning into rote learning. You either learn it by memory and you have a very good memory and still remember it, or you learn it by meaningful learning through connections, right? So you're going to do that. So that is the first scenario, that you remember, right? Now the second scenario is that you think for a while and you say definitely, no, I don't remember this, sorry for me, but I'm supposed to know this, but I don't know. So you're going to mention or you're going to classify that forgetting. Yes, so it could be the forgetting of the rote learning that we have just mentioned. There are not, well, go to a previous video, won't repeat it in here, and that could be one forgetting, or it could be the more systematic forgetting and, let's say, positive forgetting of meaningful learning. Okay, so basically that's it. The assignment number 1, it will be identifying if it's learning or forgetting and classifying it into each category. I will please appreciate if you have a short description. Let's say that the first one you say, yes, I remember, and that was meaningful learning. Okay, so make a description of about 3 sentences or 4 in which you try to give me the information of why, or what was the mechanism that you used in order to learn that, and why do you remember it, and why do you consider that it is meaningful. Or if it was something purely memoristic, if it was rote learning, well, tell me about that, the technique that you use. I don't know, you memorize this for I don't know how many days, and you repeat it and you use it every now and then. I don't know. Okay, so that's it. Also, there is a possibility that, for example, the first one you remember and the second no, or vice versa. You forget, you don't know about the first one and then the second. So it would be one forgetting, one learning. So basically the instruction is the same. Classifying it into rote or meaningful, and give a brief explanation about that. Remember that for this, you can use the diagrams, right? The diagrams that we have for forgetting, for example. So that will be the assignment number 1. You can work for this assignment number 1 in groups of 4 people maximum. Okay, this is something really short, but you can somehow nurture the experiences and give a longer story of why do you forget or do you remember. Okay, so 4 people, 3, 2, 1, as you prefer. Okay, that will be the assignment number 1. Now for the assignment number 2, you're going to do this. You're going to be working again in the same quantity. If you want to work with the same group, it's up to you. If you want to work with different groups, or one in group, the other individual, really up to you. Okay, and what you're going to do is this. You are going to think about one learning and one forgetting that you had, but only for physical activities, not intellectual ones like learning a language or knowing a concept or something like that, but something physical, right? I don't know, riding a bike, tying your shoes, if you know how to do some handicrafts, if you are able to sharpen anything, if you're able to paint, I don't know, something that is eminently physical or manual, right? Of course, many of these activities that are physical have an intellectual component, right? But we're talking about something a little bit more practical, okay? So you're going to put one thing that you remember and one thing that you forgot. You used to know how to do this, but then now you cannot do it anymore. Yes? So for example, I knew how to snap my fingers when I was a kid, and now I cannot do it anymore. You see? Things like that. Yes, again, there are a lot of different examples. Whistling, doing something that you used to do for your grandma when you were on vacation or when you were on the farm, and now that you don't remember anymore. I don't know. That's it. So remember, 2 physical things, one that you completely remember, one that you have forgotten and you don't know how to do anymore. So basically you're going to do the same exercise. You're going to classify them and see if it is rote learning or meaningful learning, rote forgetting, or systematic forgetting of the meaningful learning. Okay. Let's say that the activities are pretty short. They are not difficult at all. It is just a matter of being able to justify them and explain them in the light of theories, yes, of Ausubel. Basically, that is what we're learning. So these 4 examples, 2 from the first assignment and 2 from the second, it's going to, or should be, clear enough in order to evidence that you were able to comprehend and understand these theories. Okay, so that's it, guys. Thank you very much. We are going to work in the next week with Abraham Maslow. That's humanistic psychology, and we are almost done with the schools of thought, right? I think that, let me see. I guess that in 1 or 2 weeks we will be done with these theories of human learning, and we will go into our next branch of psycholinguistics. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a great day and see you soon. Hugs, guys. Bye bye.